It's clear at this point that Starfield has not been the resounding success that Bethesda hoped it would be. Instead, it was overhyped and somewhat of a disappointment, to the point where I've recently gone back to Skyrim, which I think is a far better game, and by the looks of it, so do plenty of other people. Starfield has many problems, from the lack of vehicles to travel across the environments, and the complete absence of maps for the settlements, to uninteresting companions. Now, Starfield is currently working on some updates, and just released one that addressed some minor issues, along with some DLC content that's due to come out later this year. But in my opinion, they are all overshadowed by two massive and fundamental issues, that being the boring environments and the just as boring setting. But I'm not here to simply criticise the game, that's easy to do. Instead, I want to break down the problems and offer some solutions. When it comes to making a space exploration game, there's two massive obstacles that need to be addressed. First of all is the massive size of space. Making a game that features even a tiny fraction of it in the detail of games such as Skyrim and The Witcher would be an enormous and time-consuming task, something that would be completely impractical with our current level of technology. This is made even worse by the fact that space is almost completely empty and dotted with lifeless barren moons, asteroids, and equally lifeless planets, all of which would be very useful for mining for resources, scientific exploration, and potentially colonising, but they aren't very interesting as the focus of an exploration game. Starfield tries and fails to address this issue by bulking out the world outside of the established cities and specific quest areas, which are handcrafted, by using procedural generation, which creates a large square area of land which you land on based upon a seed and a set of guidelines, adding randomised terrain, along with features such as mineable resources, pirate bases, and in some cases, the ruins of old abandoned structures. The result, for the most part, is endless maps of mostly nothingness, barren rocks dotted with the occasional quest marker and random point of interest. The other issue is the setting, which is incredibly boring. Now, I have absolutely no issue with the story being set in space, that's completely fine, with the Mass Effect trilogy being a perfect example of how it should be done. Take for example the main story of discovering the origin of these artifacts. This is something that feels almost like a generic questline, rather than something integral to the story or the setting. In Starfield, there's no threat that you have to deal with, no underlying problem that has to be solved. Yes, there are these strange artifacts of unknown origin, but the driving force to explore the origin is largely absent. You don't come across any competition to acquire them till halfway through the story, and at that point, you still have no idea what the point of these artifacts is. Compare this to Skyrim, which has two story quest lines, the Return of the Dragons, and the civil war between the Imperial Legion and the Stormcloaks. The story missions are woven into the setting. Dragons are randomly found throughout the map. Even when you aren't actively engaged in a story mission, you come across both Imperial Legion and the Stormcloak camp, whilst each of the many settlements have chosen a side in the war. An example of how to weave space exploration into a sci-fi story would be Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, this is a game that I didn't like. It was somewhat of a disappointment compared to the original trilogy, but the concept of the story was fine. It wasn't just about exploring a new galaxy, rather the exploration was overshadowed by the threat of the alien species known as the Ket, with this threat being the key element which helped to drive the story forward. Something that contributes to the boring setting is the lack of intelligent alien civilizations. The lack of intelligent aliens means that there's no different cultures to explore, no settlements that are in contrast to that of humanity's, less scope for different motivations, conflicts and ideals. One game that does this really well is Mass Effect, which not only has multiple alien species with their own environments, cultures and motivations, but it also adds a lot more flavour to the combat, from humans and Asari to Krogan and Vorcha, where the Starfield's enemies are essentially human pirates and various robots. Now, having humanity as the only intelligent species isn't inherently a bad thing. However, it means that you have to put more effort into fleshing out the human-based story, which Starfield hasn't done very well. There's a reason that we have aliens in game series like Halo, Mass Effect, and Warhammer 40k, along with shows like Star Trek and Star Wars. People are naturally interested in aliens, their very concept is foreign, and it allows you to explore a lot more new ideas, in contrast to Starfield's human-only setting. Unfortunately, these are huge problems, some of which would require a complete overhaul of a game, whilst others are easiest to implement. Starting with the bigger map, my solution to the universe size problem and the need for procedural generation of a map would be to pull back from the huge range of star systems that Starfield currently has, and instead concentrate on something a lot smaller. Perhaps base a story in a single cluster of star systems, with half a dozen habitable planets, instead of endless planets containing absolute nothingness. Now, I'm not saying that every inch of his planet should be unique and explorable, as you run into the size problem again, but you could develop some impressive biomes to explore, different areas like jungles, deserts, settlements, alpine and polar regions, unlike the mostly barren and empty maps that Starfield has now. As far as the lack of aliens goes, the solution to that is to expand the universe, add some alien civilizations to explore in the form of downloadable content. This is not beyond what you can reasonably do with extra content, given that they are currently working on some extra content right now. Another potential feature to add is multiplayer. Allow 2 or more people to explore the same area together. Games are often better when you have someone else to play with, and adding this feature wouldn't require a huge overhaul of a game. You already have the physical map to explore. I'm simply suggesting allowing people to do it together. A feature that would be easy to add would be some kind of fast-moving ground vehicle, something like the Mako or Nomad from Mass Effect. These would allow you to quickly move around the map to various points of interest, instead of running across these barren landscapes, which would at least make travelling across the boring maps faster. Do I think that Starfield can be improved? Certainly, in some aspects at least, with various quality of life improvements and DLC content. Unfortunately, I believe the fundamental overhaul that the game needs simply isn't going to happen. It will take too much time and money, which would likely be better spent on something else, like the 6th Elder Scrolls game, which is currently in development. That's all for now. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and if you like what you saw here, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I'll be back with more content soon. Bye for now.